Hey, listeners, are you getting inspired to dive deeper into your learning of EFFT? If so, head on over to Catherine's website to check out her list of upcoming trainings. Some trainings are focused on combining EFFT with young kids and EFFT play therapy. So head on over to her website and we hope to see you in the future. Check it out at KATHRYNDEBRUIN.com, CatherineDeBruin.com, and we hope to see you in the future.
Welcome to the Family Express podcast, where our destination is resilient and connected families. Come aboard with your hosts, marriage and family therapists Catherine DeBruin and Rhonda Evans, to explore the world of emotionally focused family therapy, a model developed by Sue Johnson and colleagues. Together with our guest speakers, our travels will map the EFFT landscape, highlighting lessons learned, shared fears, and the passion and curiosity that bonds our community.
Welcome back, audience, to the Family Express podcast with Catherine and Rhonda. Our guest today is Arthur Mensah, and he is here to talk with us about his love for the field and his mission, and I'm going to kind of walk alongside him as we explore what he loves. And we're really excited for the conversation today. Arthur, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Well, so let's start with what brought you to the field of therapy and what do you love about it, and what's your mission?
Yeah, thank you. This is probably one of my favorite stories I like to tell about my being here, because I think it just points to the fact that everything in life is connected. So I'm from West Africa originally. My mother's from Liberia. My father's from Ghana. At the time I was conceived, there was the second wave of the Liberian Civil War. And so my mother was in the midst of relocating from Liberia to Ghana, and got to Ghana. I was born 6 months early. 2 months early. I was born at 6 months. At 7 months. My bad. And after I was born, we lived in Ghana for a bit, then moved back and forth between Liberia and Ghana, and the Civil War was still going on. And so there were moments where the conflict died down a bit, and then we'll move back. And then once it escalated, we will go back to Ghana. And so there was this movement between country happening. And then as I was getting older, I started to witness a lot of things. But before then, I remember one of my first memories from school in kindergarten was sitting at a table with a few of my friends. And then when I turned, I heard two of my teachers talking, and one of them said to the other, the war has escalated again. The rebel troops are coming into the city. And that's one of my earliest memories as a child. And so being in the midst of that environment, witnessing some of the trauma that individuals got to suffer through out of no choice of theirs, and seeing family members maybe once every few years, and seeing the dysfunction of family breakup as a result of all of what was happening. As I got older, I was very then aware of circumstances and how it impacted people. In my teen years, I started to notice how my friends were emoting, what was happening in their lives, and where some of the gaps in support were. And we had a career day in 8th grade. And as I was thinking through what I wanted to be, I knew I wanted to do something within the helping field. And so I started looking up, what can I do? What can I do? And therapist was one of the options of things I saw. And as I read up on it, I was like, oh, yes, like that fills the gap that I've noticed around me. I have not seen many therapists here in West Africa, whether in Liberia or here in Ghana. And there are all these emotional needs that are not being met. There are ways in which people are being psychologically impacted by their circumstances that they're not being served. And so I said, this is what I'm going to do. And in my mind, I was going to do it at like 50 or 60. And I was like, I'll do something fun in the meanwhile, try something else. And when I'm much older, I'll give my time to that. But life circumstances played out the way they did, and I entered the field much earlier than I expected. And so, yeah, it's kind of what drove me to the field, is this awareness of the pain and suffering of people around me, and also then a deep desire to show up in that pain and suffering and help. And I think, as I was telling Yamilka, my boss, the other day, that a personal philosophy of mine too that has kind of influenced how I show up in the field is, as I grew up in the circumstances I grew up in, witnessing the love and care and affection in my community, I kind of learned early on that it seems every relationship people enter in is underscored by this need for love, a need for being known, and a need for being understood. And so I feel like everybody desires on some level to be loved, known, and understood. And my work then is to that regard, in creating opportunities for people to show up in love, show up to grow in knowledge of each other and grow in understanding.
Gosh, thank you so much, Arthur, for sharing your story. I'm sitting here it's hard to find the words when I think of the way that you grew up, and with war and, Civil War, rebel soldiers. I mean, I suppose I'm just getting this picture of you as a little guy, like looking around you and learning and seeing relationships and seeing patterns and observing how people were affected. And it sounds like you just wanted to enter the helping profession and make a difference and do something about it. And you've got a really amazing understanding of how context affects cultures, affects families, affects relationships. And on the other hand, just before the call, as we were getting to know each other, you were also talking about how individuals can affect culture. Would you mind speaking a little bit to that as well?
Yeah. And I think I feel like it's all intertwined, because for as much as I think my personality lends itself to being observant, I owe a lot of who I am to the individuals in my lives who have played significant roles in shaping me. And without my knowing so, I think likely it was a factor in me being where I am now. So my mother at the time, I didn't know explicitly what she did, but she was doing trauma healing work as the Civil War was coming to a close. And so that's something she dedicated her time to, rehabilitating individuals who had been actively participating in the conflict and people who had been impacted by it. And so they were traveling across the country, having conversations with people. And so she was absent most of the time, but I had a general sense of what her work was. And so it was okay, she's doing something meaningful. And I think as a child, there was that individual impact on me. That's one level. And then we had an aunt who helped raise us. And she would engage with us like adults, which I think afforded us the opportunity to approach a lot of conversation with a level of consideration that most kids didn't have. And she also still gave us the space to be kids. But in terms of how she talked with us, it wasn't a talking down to, it was a talking with, which I think also built this confidence that I can enter a space and have conversation with someone and have something meaningful to contribute. And then my grandmother, who individually, she was the, I guess, moral teacher of all my siblings and I and cousins, who would always instill these, she would tell us all these fun stories, but with moral lessons in it. And one of my sister's favorite is a story my grandmother would tell about a man named Mr. Do Good. And the crux of the story at the end is that if you do good, you do for yourself. And if you do bad, you also do for yourself. That the individual choices we make does not just impact the people the choices are made towards, but it's also impacting us. And so I think in that regard, in watching those women and the efforts they put into raising us influence each of us and how we grew in the world, gave me this perspective that as an individual, I have something I can give that will leave a lasting impact on the people I'm engaging with. That as individuals, as we're engaged in conversation, engaged in relationships, we're influencing the people we are having contact with. And then how we show up is equally as important as what we get out of a relationship, because it is an endeavor. A relationship is a space that we share. And so it's not just me showing up in want of things, but I also get to contribute, and I should be excited about how I can impact and influence the life of another in a way that's enriching and honoring.
This is so rich, Arthur. Like, what an incredible upbringing under dire circumstances at times. And you said, like, moving between countries, your mom's away, doing important work, which you understood on some level what mom was contributing to. And then you do have your aunts and people raising you, but helping you, like, have hope, helping you make meaning, helping you know what you could do and who you could be, and really just sort of distilling what was going on in the big wide world and helping you, like, talk about it and metabolize it.
Mhm.
I mean, it
Yeah.
reminds me a little bit about, have you read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
Viktor Frankl. Yeah.
Oh, it's my favorite book in all of the world. And if for our listeners, if you're new to the book, he was a Jewish psychiatrist who was imprisoned by the Nazis, and he actually survived. I think he was in Auschwitz, or I think he was in Poland. And when he wrote a book about that experience, and he said that he made a study of the people who made it, and the people who made it recognized that internally they couldn't be imprisoned, that even though they were imprisoned externally, they could still have their own choice over who they would be in the circumstances. And so they made meaning of their experience in a healthy, powerful way.
Yeah.
That's just what it makes me think about as you're speaking.
Yeah. And I think that that's the point of why we do what we do as therapists, that we work in hope. We work to offer people perspectives on the fact that life doesn't have to just be the suffering or the pain or the challenges you're wrestling through in any moment, that there is more that exists beyond it. And we stand here as a bridge towards the now and the what can be possible if you are willing to put in the work and effort. That life is never just a hopeless endeavor. And depending on context, that may look differently. And certain individuals may need to overcome more challenges to have access to that ultimate hope, but there's always hope.
So I think I'm understanding your philosophy and sort of the big picture. And as you talk about as therapists, like, let's bring it down into a therapy office. You're sitting across from a parent in EFFT. And the parent, as many parents often, just feel like they aren't prepared for parenting. Like, who trains us? Who teaches us?
Yeah.
And parent is wanting parenting skills, or is just overwhelmed with sort of their lack of knowledge or their lack of confidence.
Yeah.
Like, how do you bring this into a moment like that?
I think, first and foremost, in thinking of therapy and what it is, I think in as much as it is a birth child of scientific inquiry into the nature of human experiences and how we show up and who we are, I think therapy is also art. And with every art form, the act of creatively, like, engaging with another, I think awakens or has the potential to awaken, like, dormant sentiments we have within us that speak to the ways of living out of which, like, the human desire to create springs. And I think in that regard, therapy has this double layer of, yes, it's science and it's also art. And art is a human thing. It's a human experience that we can grow in and evolve in and express in. And so then in talking with parents, in thinking of therapy as art and living as a form of art and expressing, then the process is the process of recognizing that you can always do more beyond what is happening. Like, you don't have one small canvas you're working on. You have a massive canvas that grows with time as you are growing into responsibility, as you're growing in experience, as you're growing in relationship, as your kids are evolving. And I think in that regard, then we as therapists, which is to a degree some of the conversation we're having before it, is we're positioned to create opportunities for people to learn how to do relationships well. We're positioned to help parents learn how to parent well because, and I had spoken to the fact that my frustration and part of why I'm in the field is that with everything in life, we think, we are willing to give effort to teaching people how to do. We're excited to hold a child's hand when they're learning how to walk and like cheering them on in the walking process. We're excited to teach a child how to read as a marker of them growing in like cognition and communication. We are excited to encourage people to learn new languages. When you go to a new job, there's training to help you get used to what that environment is like. And I think every other place we seem to have this idea that people need to learn and grow and be taught how to do things, except in relationships where the expectation is just because I'm in contact with another person, I know what I'm doing. And I think a lot of times is where the challenge comes from as people stumble through relationships from a lack of knowing or from a lack of support. Because sometimes it's not that we don't have access to the information or the help that we need, but we don't know how to reach for that as well. I can't give what I don't have. I can't ask questions from places of not knowing. If I don't know, I don't know what I don't know. And I can ask questions about what I don't know because it's not even in my awareness. And so then therapy and relationships becomes this arena where I think individuals can come and bring forth all their learnings to help each other build in relationship as a way of influencing culture forward towards that idea of hope for what healthy relationships look like, for what good parenting look like, and maybe even great sibling relationships, because that's another part of therapy I'm really fascinated by is getting siblings in therapy to talk through what it looks like to be a sibling. Because I think in culture, the idea of sibling rivalry is more popular than sibling friendship, which also frustrates me because I think it's your first friendship you actually have in life. And if we can cultivate a way for you to learn how to build that relationship well, then it's setting you up for success later on in life.
Listeners, check out our book for children of any age. It's called A Jumble of Thoughts and a Tangle of Feelings. It's on Amazon.com. If you know a child out there who is having a tough time, but unable to put that distress into words, this book is your guide to helping them figure out what is going on. Whether you're an educator, a therapist, or a parent, we really think this will be a helpful guide for you.
You want me to go? So I can feel my brain, like your brain connects all different kinds of ideas and has a really beautiful way of stringing them together. And I can feel my brain really trying hard to keep up. If I had to summarize, it sounds like when you're sitting in the therapy room with a family and with parents, you know that you are in a really beautiful position to have an influence on this parent, have an influence on this family, and that thus the ripple effect have an influence on their family culture, their neighborhood, and the wider culture. And by doing that, you recognize you are a beacon of hope for them. And that even if they don't know something, even if they haven't been taught something, there's a way you have of accessing or instilling hope in them and agency in them so that they can then kind of, I think in a sense, perhaps access agency, access a stronger, wiser other, or get resourced by you, build up their confidence. And I think I think that's a mission that a lot of therapists have. And I can see how your personal history really brings that, like, to pinpoint focus. The influence from your mother, the influence from your aunt, the influence from your grandmother, these individual relationships, an individual relationship between therapist and parent can be so critical, can be so
Yeah.
powerful, can be such a source of resourcing and empowerment. And I feel like you want to give out what you've been given, and you want
Yeah.
to contribute what has been contributed to you.
Yeah. And I think a factor of that is just the perspective of before I'm anything, I'm a person, I'm a human being. And that is the greatest common denominator of all of our experiences, that we are all people. Before I'm a therapist, I'm a person. Before I'm a father, I'm a person. Before I'm a brother, I'm a person. Before I'm a child, I'm a person. And we are all having human experiences. And how do I then reach for that human experience and meet another person where they are, seeing them in the fullness of their humanity in order to serve their need? And so for me as a therapist, I see myself being positioned to create opportunities to understand what the human experience this other person is having and how it's intersecting with other human experiences. That a family is just a web of human experiences in close proximity to each other. A parent is having a human experience of what it looks like to be responsible in caring for another person who may not yet have developed the capacity to do so for them or for others, because they are still learning and stumbling through that learning process. A child is a person having a human experience of what it looks like to receive care and learn well from the people around them about what it looks like to exist within my context, what it looks like to grow within my context, what it looks like to grow in making choices in life in a way that sets me up for the future to then become that responsible other who is giving to another. And so I think for me, then it's just a string of opportunities I'm looking for to sit with people in their humanity and understand what they're needing and understand how I can serve them in being better. Because once a person walks in the therapy room, one thing is clear. They are communicating to me, I'm excited about working, and there's something that matters to me that I want to make strides in to improve. That people who choose to come in are choosing to come in because they value something enough. And for me, then as a therapist, it's an opportunity to reach into that value and see how I can build up the necessary resources, or maybe encourage them to take up strength in areas where they're already strong, as a way of balancing out places where they may not be as strong or needing to still grow in at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I really love that, Arthur. Like, instead of telling them what to do, just see them for who they are. Get to know them and see them and appreciate them on a human to human level, right?
Yeah.
We never want to do for other people that which they can do for themselves. And Mhm.
sorry, I was just going to add that I think in every relationship, to the big overarching EFT question of do I matter, that what it looks like to matter is to be seen in the fullness of the experience you're having.
Yeah.
That you want to know the person sitting across from you is seeing everything that's happening with you and taking concern in all of what is playing out for you.
Yeah. And so we really lean in with a relationship and with curiosity and with pleasure. Sometimes I think of it as it's just a moment. It's an experience. Like, what if this family coming into my office, what if I only see them one time? How can this one time, this experience of sitting with them, stand alone? Like, I never want to assume that they're going to come back. But I imagine that I'm dropping into their world at a moment in time, and I want to figure out, who are they in this moment? What's the dilemma they're having today in a very big context? And how can I be helpful, a resource, a source of strength? And that starts with me just coming in with respect and gentleness and curiosity and admiration and getting to know them.
Yeah. I think to add on to that, something, so my personal philosophy of everyone desires to be loved, known, and understood. And for me, then love is an endeavor that requires at least two people to be felt and experienced. And so when a client walks in, it's a recognition of the fact that I have an opportunity to extend this. One, two, hope is a thing that never dies out. So I'm working from a place of hope. And in that regard, every effort I put in serving this person in love and seeking to know them and understand them is leaving a legacy that maybe I never get to see again. But in every human contact I'm having, there's an impact that's being made. And so how I show up is super important, that I don't need to see a person 5, 10 times to be able to leave some impact in their world, because just the fact that we engaged in conversation, there's a shared influence that's happening, that I have learned something about you and your story that will forever remain with me as a therapist, that maybe when I work with another client or family later down the line, your story and the stories of others who've come before influences the stance I have and how I engage and show care to others. And I think in that same way, as a therapist, then I'm giving to a family, an individual, a couple, that same degree of influence, that even if we don't see each other multiple times, it's the shared human experience towards that hope that matters. And so I think in that regard, then I don't have to stand in anxiety on account of the fact that I feel like my work is not done, because we're working in human experiences and human experiencing never ends. We can never prepare for how life is going to play out. No one expected 2020 to happen, and then it happened, and we all had to adjust to what that looked like. And if I had terminated with clients, let's say December 31st, 2019, and then the pandemic hits in 2020, I could have said technically my work is done, but then they're having more experiences outside of that that is impacting them, that maybe might bring them back in. And so you never know what influence you have. You never know how it's going to impact people. So the most important thing, I think, in working in a field of hope is showing up in a way that you can leave people with a beacon of hope, and trust that their efforts matter and their efforts can leave an impact in reshaping the culture of their relationships.
Mm. Yeah, you are. It's very inspirational to sit with you, by the way. It's very inspirational. I love how you see the world. And I love this idea that as the therapist sits with each parent, each person, that we're impacting their lives and they are teaching us. We're being impacted just as much. That love going back and forth is dynamic. It's transmitted in the relationship. And that every encounter is an opportunity to live and to grow. And that is how culture then also can be touched, right? That's how we can have impact on the very big outside world, actually.
Yeah. And I think to the culture piece, and I am grateful for the fact that I grew up in an African context, that I have seen traditions, I've seen history and shared experiences as all being factors of emotions and connection. That there's this thing that happens in a lot of African cultures where there's this like attachment to traditions that came before and the need to carry on those traditions. And so I think by that logic, then there are more expansive notions of family at play in culture. That usually when we think family, we think mother, child, parents. But I think growing up in Africa, I had this expansive view of what family looks like, which is the ties to the people who came before me, who set the stage for the influence of what I got to receive and care from family members. That there were a person who taught another person how to do a relationship, who taught another person how to be a parent, and on and on and on. And so in that regard, those string of events ties to the legacies that inform identity and how people view themselves. And I think that often comes with certain commitments to a type of responsibility towards like furthering those legacies that preceded the individuals, especially, and again, talking from an African context. And so then traditions in certain African contexts, and although it may not be explicitly stated in this manner, becomes like a storied legacy of families and their communities. That, as I was telling the story earlier of my watching my cousin have her child and watching these older women who had been mothers before show up to take care of the child as a way of showing what it looks like to be a mother in different contexts, then it's part of the history of the tradition of what care looks like that has lived on. And I think in the work we do, there's some of that we are extending to people in their families to begin with, that in the same way that now I can look and say, oh, this is what the cultural tradition of my Liberian family is. We are extending that to parents and how they communicate. And then their kids take pieces of that if they do start families and carry that on and grow in it over time. And then over time, we have this long legacy of healthy communicative relationships where emotions can be received and shared, where people can be heard and seen. And so in that regard, we're enhancing capacities for empathy for individuals to share both in the small and momentous occasions of each other's lives.
Mm-hmm. Arthur, could you tell that story again? The one about how family was so supportive in the child raising?
Yeah. And so I was 11. We had gone to a family reunion and my cousin had just had her baby. And so there was this excitement around this baby. Everybody wanted to hold the baby. Everybody was taking care of the baby. And one of the things I noticed in my observant nature as a child was the fact that each person in the room that had already been a mother. So my mother was the first person I noticed who took the child and was caring for the child. I think at that moment, my cousin's son needed a bath. So she held him, was teaching my cousin how to bathe him by bathing the child herself. Like, oh, you do this. And if he's sick, here are things you need to know as well. And was showing what the care of a mother looks like with bathing. And then my other aunt took the baby to feed the baby. My grandmother took the baby to put the baby to sleep. And so, whereas in other contexts, all of that pressure of bathing and feeding and putting to bed would be on the mother, there are other women who have experienced it who are showing up both in care and support to give her the room to not have to be responsible for doing all of that and have some of the weight of motherhood taking off her shoulders. And also then to demonstrate what it looks like to care. That for me, then in witnessing that, it's in order to, in being in relationship, part of what it looks like is showing up and doing the thing beyond just a conversation of like, we need to communicate or this is how we need to communicate, but actually doing it, that an enactment of care, an enactment of what support looks like, then becomes the legacy of what the family is. Because there are other people who've done it before who can show you in actual time what it looks like to do it while giving you the room to like witness and learn and grow in it, so that all the pressure of being this one thing is not on you. Back to the point of like, we need to teach people how to do relationships and not just expect them. That anyone who becomes a mother for the first time is the first time they're ever becoming a mother. And so what it means to be a mother is something they're needing to grow and learn in. And without the support to then show up and display, but also support in care, that process places a lot of burden on the individual, because the assumption that, oh, you just have this motherly instinct. And while that may be true, you're also an individual having just gone through labor and maybe tired because you're not sleeping well. And so all the things that come with the responsibility of motherhood, you may not have the capacity for. And to have other people show up in that regard to teach you, but also take weight off your shoulders, I think is extremely beautiful.
Well, that's really beautiful. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful picture. Thank you. I'm thinking of as families come in, as we sit with them and get to know them, we get to ask about those kinds of stories, like who shows up for them, where have they learned what they've learned, what is their family tradition. But we are also getting to sit with them in experiences I
Mhm.
just feel like I'm getting dropped into the middle of the family, and I get to feel it from the inside out and get a sense of what it's like to be them. And I really want them to feel at home in my room so that they start acting like they would at home. So I can really see and feel like where's the conflict and what happens and who acts out with who, and feel into, what each person's experiencing. And then actually get to watch and see, like, how do the parents show up, and start pointing out positive parenting moments, and really take that slowly before I step in any other, intentional kind of way.
Yeah.
That just that experiential learning, right? Like taking us all the way back to you as a little guy, experiencing so much in Libya, and yet you had your aunt by your side explaining to you what was happening,
Yeah.
and giving you a voice and a sense of purpose, being able to make meaning in a hard situation.
Yeah. And I think that just sums up for me what the role of the therapist is. That in the being dropped in the middle of the experience, you are partaking in the exchange with the family and all the weight of the emotions that come with what they're wrestling through and all
Yeah.
the awkward clunkiness of them trying to figure it out. And
Yeah.
that's where I think even if it's for one session, you have now been a participant in what it looks like to take steps towards healthy communication, what it looks like to give attention to a person who is needing it in a moment. When you
Mm.
say, hey, I'm noticing you're having a response as we're talking about this, others are witnessing you show up and show care. And
Mm.
in that moment, even if it seems small, it's not wasted because it's a showing of what it looks like to give attention to a person who's experiencing something emotionally when the tensions are high. Or yeah. So in that regard, there's always hope, even if it's one session, if it's 10 sessions, if it's 100 sessions, we
Yeah.
are partaking in the experience with them and teaching them by doing and giving attention.
Gosh. Arthur, thank you for your voice and your presence, and for your beautiful outlook and philosophy. And gosh, we wish you the very best in your career, in your world. And this is really leaving me with a lot of inspiration and hope, not just for the next family that I see, but for the world that we're living in right now. And the idea that there's always hope. We can impact people. We can impact the world and culture, one relationship at a time. And it starts with us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And for everyone listening, as a final sign off, one thing I would say is that influence, growth, and healing are factors of relationships. There are qualities that happen in relationships. They're not a process that are absent of a relationship. And if you're in a relationship, you have a capacity to influence how things pan out. You have a capacity to grow in that relationship, and you have a capacity to heal with people. That none of those things can happen without us being in contact with others. So regardless of how hard or challenging things feel, just the fact that you're in those relationships, you can take hope knowing that all the things you're desiring can happen in that space you're sharing with another person.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Arthur. As you've been speaking these last few minutes, I just had this image stick with me of a tapestry, and how on the tapestry of someone's life, there are many weavers who come and go, and there might be new threads, and the weaver might pull on attachment through time and space and intergenerational moments. And then you weave in a new moment, and the therapist may come in and weave in a new moment. And it all has an impact across time and space and into the future. Thank you so much for sitting with us today, Arthur.
Of course, my pleasure. And thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Thank you. Bye.
That's it for today, folks. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again for our next journey.